Hey CLC, we are here in Philadelphia Adult and Teen Challenge Center with their executive director, Greg McFarland. Greg, welcome to our Go Moment for Christian Life Center today.
Thank you so much for having me, Pastor Paulie. I'm so excited to be here with you guys and with CLC, and just blessed to be able to share a little bit about our program and what we're doing.
Yeah, well, originally I was going to have Greg come up, and I thought, you know what? We've been supporting this ministry here for quite a while, and we love Teen Challenge. We believe in Teen Challenge. But I was interested that the name says Philadelphia Adult and Teen Challenge. So could you tell us a little bit about the progression of what you do for young people, what you do for adults, and how that all works right here in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
And the other thing about the Teen Challenge here is it's a women's-based program, which I thought was really wonderful to bring to you today. You probably didn't know that.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
I am so glad you asked that, because that was a misconception for many years.
Yeah.
Within Teen Challenge. Teen Challenge started as a center back in the 50s and the 60s for adolescent teens who were caught up in gang violence and gang trouble. And as the progression of a kind of society and of issues in society changed, it went from the need being with gangs in New York and gangs in major cities to eventually the crack epidemic in the 80s, and then eventually into heroin, which is our main issue today, amongst other drugs.
Yeah.
And so Teen Challenge ended up developing from being a teen program for adolescents who were in trouble with gangs and different legal issues and stuff like that, to being focused on drugs, and then eventually turned into an adult program. But we had started as Teen Challenge, and we had kept our name Teen Challenge all the way up until 2000, I believe, 16 or 2017. We changed our name to Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge from Teen Challenge Training Center. And the reason for the name change was to let people know that we serve adults 18 and over. And so we kept the original name Teen Challenge, but added Adult and Teen Challenge to that. There are still teen centers that are Teen Challenge centers operating throughout the US, and they can be found on the Teen Challenge USA website. However, we are for people struggling with substance use disorders who are 18 and over, and specifically in the Philadelphia Adult and Teen Challenge Center, we're serving women who have substance use disorders or struggling with or in the bondage of addiction here in Philadelphia.
You said something interesting. So the drug of choice right now that you're seeing is heroin, is the most difficult problem you're facing with. Most of the people you come in contact with here are addicted to heroin?
I would say yes. That's a majority of the population that we serve is addicted to heroin. Now, you do see a broad range of different addictions and different substances of choice, but I would say predominantly, especially in society right now, heroin is a very big issue, all the way up to the national level. Even the president is working against the heroin epidemic, and it's getting stronger and more illicit as time goes on.
We hear it, but still sometimes we're still kind of stuck in the tradition of alcoholism, or but we really are in a war on drugs. It's not just a tagline, right? It is really an issue.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say we're stuck in a mindset, in the individuals we serve. That's one thing that we're really trying to work with churches and within our own organization to make sure that we don't take any, mindset into it that would hinder the work that we do. There can be, especially even during COVID, stigma can be a major problem. And seeing and not understanding addiction can be a problem, whether it's in churches or in individual families. And so we really work to kind of try to educate individuals, especially families, with our family programming, to understand, how to talk to someone, a person who is struggling with a substance use disorder.
Yeah, stigma. Yeah, I've heard a lot of conversation about how to battle stigma and yet, deal with the issue, because there's just certain things that happen when you're addicted. There are just certain mannerisms that come out of addiction. Tell me your story a little bit. We were talking earlier, and I want to get back to the program because I do think people don't really understand all that you do and how much credentialing now that Teen Challenge does. It's not just faith-based alone anymore, but it's really education. You yourself are a licensed professional counselor. You have, really trained professionals working here, which I think is a beautiful addition to our faith-based belief system. But you were telling me that you only went up to the 6th grade for education yourself. Give us a little highlight of your personal story and how Teen Challenge impacted your life.
Yeah, so like you said, 6th grade was the highest grade level I went in school. I had started using drugs around the age of 11 or 12. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember, the very first substance I used was marijuana and alcohol. And I did it because I wanted to be rebellious and because I wanted to kind of be cool and hang out with cool people. And, there was older kids that were doing it, so I got to fit in with them and a lot of other people. And it gave me a sense of identity. And it gave me a kind of a thrill, but it also gave me kind of built a name for myself around that. And so I dropped out of school. I just was done with that, and I just went and did my own thing. And my addiction progressed from just using like marijuana and alcohol to cocaine to other hallucinogenic drugs, all the way up until at the age of 16 going into 17, I thought some friends of mine were using cocaine, and I came in and I said, hey, can I have some of that? Not knowing it was methamphetamine that they were doing.
Wow.
And at that point, I would say I was functional. I could maintain a job. I had a relatively normal social life with people who were in addiction and out of addiction. And I kind of tried to maintain a facade that I was a normal kid just struggling with school. And at the point that I tried that, I can say honestly, I became immediately addicted to it. Some people would say that, some people wouldn't. I would say that immediately I was addicted to the amphetamines, and immediately after I used it, I asked some people, how do I get it? And they said, well, you can just make it yourself. And I said, okay, well, teach me how to do that.
Oh, my goodness.
Within a couple days of trying it, I started manufacturing methamphetamine.
How about
and
that?
My somewhat normal life became completely abnormal. It was just up all night, running around the streets for days at a time, constantly getting in trouble. I got arrested a couple months after for having some on me, and I got off on a technicality. And I went back to using and manufacturing it and selling it, and I got arrested again shortly after I turned 18, and it was for having a meth lab. And so I did a year in jail, and then I had 3 years of probation after that. And in jail, I was like, you know what, I don't want to do jail time. I don't like this. It's no fun going to jail. So I was like, I'm gonna stay clean. Now, I didn't know the Lord. I didn't surrender my life to theOrd or anything like that. It was just kind of my own will, my own power. I'm gonna stay clean. And
one break to your story. So was this in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin?
This is all in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. Yeah.
He's a fellow Wisconsinite, because I hail from Wisconsin too, so I had to throw that in there real quick. Now go on with your story.
So this is all in Wisconsin.
All in Wisconsin. Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm getting out of jail. I have this mindset, and I know anybody who's listening to this who's struggled with drug and alcohol throughout their life knows exactly what I'm talking about, where you're just motivated internally, but you don't have a plan for it. You don't have any of the Lord to kind of working in your life or any transformative things happening. No resources. It's just you want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I got out of jail, and I only lasted 2 weeks, and I relapsed on marijuana, and marijuana is one of them drugs that people will try to kind of desensitize, or to kind of talk away.
They'll argue about.
But it was the first drug I used.
Yeah.
And it was with me all through my addiction.
Wow.
And it led to relapses constantly as a teenager and as a young adult. And so I started with marijuana, and within I think a day, I was back into amphetamines and other drugs, and I started selling drugs again. And I did that for almost a year, And then I got pulled over, and they brought the canine unit when they pulled me over because they had known who I was. And
Right,
knew
you
that
had a
I was-
reputation already.
Yeah. And so they pulled me over and I went to prison. And this is where, the impact of my family really comes in, and the prayer of believers who wanted to see me experience life change really came in. Is while I was in prison, I got addicted to morphine. And I was buying it and selling it, and we were smuggling it in. Yeah, and that's just like heroin. It's just the pharmaceutical version of, an opiate. And so,
So you're a smart guy too.
Yeah.
You are a smart guy.
Well, I was motivated.
You were a motivated guy.
I was too bright,
Not
but
too
I was
bright.
super
Well, you
motivated.
know what I mean? Yeah.
So I got addicted to that, and my family was coming to visit me, and I would always try to hide it from them.
Yeah.
So they thought I was safe and doing good in prison, and I would always paint this story that I was doing real good, when really I was just sneaking around doing other bad things different ways.
You just found another way.
Yeah, and the one time they were supposed to go to La Crosse, and a friend of mine was supposed to visit. They called and I had just used a bunch of pills because I didn't think they were coming. They said we're gonna go on this trip, and then the trip got canceled. My friend canceled. They found out my friend canceled and weren't going on this trip no more, so they came and see me. I had just taken all of these pills, and they saw me, and I was a wreck. I was couldn't hold my head up. I threw up during the time we were together, and they just knew, they knew that I was on drugs again. They knew all of it. And so they left, and a week later, my dad came alone, and he says to me, I don't know how you managed to do it in prison. Your mom finally thought you were in a place you couldn't get high anymore. And she's back to crying herself to sleep every night, and he said, I don't know what we're gonna do, and it was, then that I kind of realized that that's what was all I cared about was drugs. As he was telling me this, I knew what the reaction should be, but it wasn't. It was like, how am I gonna get him off my back again? Was my thought.
Yeah.
And it's such a horrible thought to have, but in addiction, you prioritize it over everything.
It really does.
And he left, and he's a truck driver. He was at a truck stop in like the middle of nowhere, like Alabama or something. And this guy comes up and sits next to him, and this is the week after he came to talk to me about my mom and about what I was doing. And he sits next to him, and they're waiting for like a shower at a truck stop, and he starts telling my dad about his nephew who went through Teen Challenge in Texas, and how he was addicted to heroin, and now he's clean, and he's got a job, and he's starting a family and all this stuff. And my dad is like starting to get super excited because he never heard of a year-long faith-based program that works specifically with people in drug and alcohol. He knew of rehabs and stuff like that, but he had never heard of something that is really just geared towards success in a spiritual sense, in a physical
Were your
and
parents
recovery
Christian?
sense. Yeah.
They were?
Yeah,
okay,
they
so
were
you were
believers.
raised in the church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I really, I was kind of one of them kids that really didn't understand what was going on. I just kind of was there.
Yeah.
And so he came back and asked me to go to Teen Challenge. And at first I said, no, I'm not going back. And he came back every chance he could to tell me to go to Teen Challenge. And we argued, and finally I was like, fine, I'll go, And so I got out of prison, and he called my probation officer immediately. And probation officers are great resources for people in addiction. They can really help someone get the care they need. So my probation officer said, you're not allowed to go home. You're not allowed to step foot in your town. If you do, I'll have you arrested because you committed to Teen Challenge and you're going. So I went straight to Teen Challenge. And I wanted to fight the system. I wanted to prove that Teen Challenge couldn't save me and couldn't change me, because if I proved that the best program in the world couldn't change me, they would just leave me alone and let me do my thing. So I came in fighting, but I liken Teen Challenge, and especially the early parts of Teen Challenge, to feeding a baby. You feeding a baby a spoonful at a time, and he's batting it away and batting it away, and you're just trying to get nourishment.
The milk
in
of the
them.
word.
Yeah, and you're trying to teach them the word. You're trying to teach them about recovery. You're trying to teach them about life skills. You're trying to show them that you just care. And like a baby, they're batting away 3 out of every 4 bites and making a mess.
Spitting it in your face.
Spitting it in your face and doing all this stuff. And you just keep doing it, you know, because you know the value of what you have to offer and who you have to offer. And that's really what happened to me is I've just been batting it away 2 months, fighting. And then finally I was struggling. I had gotten in trouble, so I was on like a discipline where they go into like a more intense training part of the program. And so I was in the library, and my training was to read and work through the Bible. And I had to do so much before I was, you know, off of this discipline thing. So I was writing out James, the book of James, and James 1:21 is, therefore get rid of all moral filth and evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, for it is strong enough to save your soul. And it was when I was writing out that verse that the Lord really spoke to me and pretty much said, what is your life? You know, who are you? What have you sown into? And I could only say filth. I could only say that I've invested my life and all my teen years into just things that were either evil or drugs and alcohol or self-serving to that capacity. And that's when I surrendered my life to the Lord. That's when I surrendered to the program. That's when I surrendered to, you know, making the most out of my time in Teen Challenge. Yeah.
In that scripture.
Yeah. And so at that point, that's when I started accepting the food. That's when I started accepting the nourishment.
Let me ask you a question. So for parents, you know, I know some of you may be out there. I know we have members in our church who have children's, you know, trapped in addiction. It touches almost, if not directly, indirectly, I think 1 in 3 people right now with addiction. What do you say to that family that has a kid like you, that has a kid who's in and out, one mess after another, who's still, you know, struggling in their addiction? It's different than the kid who just starts over here. What's the first thing that a parent like that needs to do?
I would reach out to, you know, some like your local people in your local community for help. You know, enablement is a big buzzword in addiction, and enablement is when, as a parent, you want to do the best for your loved one. But what you end up doing is you end up creating an environment that makes it easier for them to continue in their addiction. And this just kind of happens because an addict going through addiction doesn't realize this, but they're learning how to train the people around them to help them continue in their addiction. And so there's a theory or a practice out there called raising the bottom. And what you're doing when you raise the bottom is that you're saying, hey, you can't come home. You know, you may have to spend the night in a homeless shelter. You may have to sleep in your car. But I'm not going to support anything that's not going to lead to long-term recovery.
And you know, so one of the myths you could almost say is, you know, that love and caring, that, you know, if you just keep, you know, giving and giving and giving, but actually what's better is to just say, you know what, these are your choices, and so that's what you're going to have to do, basically. I think that's a real challenge. Every parent I talk to is like, but what if they die? What if they get hurt? What if somebody hurts them? You know, that seems to be what really motivates parents, which makes that hard for them to do.
And that is the hardest thing about being a parent, a brother, a sister, or any loved one, you know, a friend. The hardest thing is the fear that comes with loving someone who has this bondage of addiction. But there's 2 things to say about that. One is there's a quote in recovery that is, the pain to change, or the motivation to change, only comes when the pain to stay the same is greater than the pain to change. Okay? So we know that what motivates someone in addiction who needs recovery and is stuck in addiction is pain. You know, nobody goes to rehab without some negative influence happening in their life.
Yeah.
You know, it's legal problems, it's
Yeah.
they got kicked out of their home, it's their wife or their husband is about to leave them if they don't quit. You know, there's something going wrong in their life that causes them to say, okay, I need treatment now because I've just gone too far and now I have these problems.
Yeah.
So we know that pain motivates change. And then we've all heard the phrase rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people only
Right. Rock bottom.
they only go to treatment when they hit rock bottom. So the what I said earlier about the theory of raising the bottom is saying, okay, if your rock bottom is when you've burnt me out so much that I can't have you in my home for fear of our safety or for fear of whatever, or I've just done this so much, I just know it's not working.
Yeah.
So you raise the bottom by bringing those consequences that they would experience on the way down to bottom sooner. So you don't bail
Gotcha.
them out of jail.
I like that.
You don't give them money for
Right,
gas.
right.
You don't let them come home when they're inebriated or on a substance. You don't excuse it when they miss
Yeah.
group or when they miss a meeting or when they miss certain things.
So basically, you're saying helping them to hit rock bottom quicker.
Yeah,
Basically.
You're saying,
I mean, you're
okay.
saying it in a nice way.
Yeah.
By raising the bottom so that they hit the bottom more
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, and then they can't sustain.
Yeah, that's
Because
good.
every day in addiction, whether we're a part of their addiction or not, is
Yeah.
a risk.
Yeah.
You know,
that's right.
every time they buy a new bag of drugs
Yeah.
off the street, you know, now there's carfentanil, there's fentanyl, there's these
Yeah.
things that are 100 times more potent than
Yeah.
yesterday's heroin
Yeah.
that could cause an overdose. So every day they spend in addiction is a risk, you know, and so that fear cannot dictate our behavior
Yes.
towards our loved ones.
Yeah, that's really good. That was something important because I know we a lot of families struggle with that issue. And the other thing I noticed on your website, by the way, you can check out their website. We'll have that on the bottom of the screen for you. But that you use volunteers in your program from the churches. You resource the churches into your program. How does that work? And how would someone, say, from Christian Life Center that may want to get connected, how would that work for you?
Our most intimate way for someone to volunteer, and we just absolutely love having this, is our mentor program.
Okay.
And that's where ladies from the church come and actually mentor a student throughout their entire time in the
Wow.
program. And this is just unbelievably valuable. We just care so much about our mentors and about the care that they receive throughout their time. But that's a large way. You know, other ways is somebody might volunteer by coming out and mowing the lawn or taking care of the
Right.
grounds. You know, if somebody's handy and wants to help around the house with different needs, this is a coach house that we actually have. It's a very large coach house that we operate in.
Yeah, and how old was it again?
1800 is when it was built.
This house was built in 1800.
So there's just different handyman needs that some
Yeah.
people might come in and take care of. Now, during COVID, there's a lot more restrictions
Yeah.
on volunteers and on people from the community coming in during the pandemic, but you know, we're moving towards green and things are opening up again. But the best way for a volunteer to really know what role they could play here would be just to call in, and we'll put our number on the bottom of the screen if that's all right.
Yep.
And you can
available.
give us a call and you can let us know, hey, I want to volunteer, you know, these are my skills, or, you know, I'm into discipleship and I'm into pastoral care, and I'd love to see if, you know, the role of mentoring would be available for me.
It's so amazing that you say that, because I was just speaking with Pastor Christy from our church, and we were just talking about mentorship, and to have a women's program here. I think women in particular really respond well to mentorship.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, we were talking earlier that women go through crisis differently than men. You were stating that they're much more traumatized often, you know, in that life of addiction and abuse. There's a lot of, they just handle that all differently for women. And so the more support they get, the better they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they connect so well with,
Yeah.
you know, older ladies that have walked in the faith, that have faced, you know, some mentors may have a life of recovery, some may have grown up in the church, but they have so much to share.
Yeah.
And so much that these ladies can
Does your
glean from.
volunteer have to have a background at all? Can they just have, you know, just grown up in the faith and you know, without having any experience to that?
Yeah, I
Is
would
that
say
still
we
something
do.
valuable?
We do have like an application process for
Okay.
volunteers.
Okay,
So
good.
and so that'll be very interactive.
Okay,
We'll call,
so you'll know.
you know, we'll call their references. We'll call and speak to
Okay,
their pastor.
good.
You know, we'll just see if they're a good fit. You know,
Yeah.
and make sure that the lady that they might work with is a good fit for them as well.
Great. Well, thank you for your time today. It's been
Yeah.
very insightful.
Absolutely.
And we're so happy to be part of what you're doing here. And thank you for opening up your home and your time and your ministry to help
Absolutely.
others. You know, living the mission is not always easy. As a matter of fact, a lot of times there's lots of obstacles, lots of problems, lots of things that we have to overcome. But as you can see from his story, God's really equipped him to do what almost seems impossible in the natural is really possible in the kingdom. So thank you for your service and your testimony today. And we love you. Go live your mission and live strong.